Our next speaker, our last speaker of the night, Lina Lina Abu Jarada is a Palestinian refugee in Jordan, originally from the Palestinian city of Yafa. She is an architect, artist, and activist. She uses her art to call for the Palestinian right of return. Lina has spent the last 10 years utilizing art mediums in order to tell the story of Palestine and the Middle East, including creating award-winning videos, controversial comics, and large murals. She has exhibited her artwork and spoke of the importance of peaceful resistance through art in countless events in Jordan, Turkey, Tunisia, the US, Ireland, and Argentina. Thanks again for joining us, Lina.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so inspired by all the speakers here today. And it really does show how resilient and stubborn we are as Palestinians. When you think about this idea that the world superpowers, the United States, Britain, and now Israel, have been waging this war against Palestinians for over 70 years, whether that's through apartheid, occupation, colonization, massacre, propaganda, all in order to break the Palestinian spirit and to diminish our identity. And yet here we are today from all around the world, accomplishing great things and continuing the struggle for a free Palestine. And so I always say that we don't need to wait to be invited to the global table. We don't need to wait for the United Nations or international entities to acknowledge us or legitimize us. We need to defy all of these structures that have really upheld our oppression and create our own global platforms and voice and force our identities to the world. So I'm so glad that there are events like this that allow us to reach that global level and to give that voice to all Palestinians. And that's really what drives my work, everything that you mentioned, whether that's my activism, social work, artwork, writing, my teaching, all of it is really me dedicating myself to be excellent in order to reach global platforms and stand proud and tall and say, I am Palestinian. Last year, I had a really proud moment of standing in the United Nations and wearing Palestinian embroidery and giving a speech and mentioning that I'm Palestinian. And to me, it was such an important, victorious moment where I felt like I am representing Palestine to the best of my ability. And I'm saying to the world, here I am, and I'm Palestinian regardless of what you think. I'm also currently doing a master's in global affairs, and I was the first Jordanian Palestinian to get into one of the most competitive master's programs. And it was important to me because I wanted to be there in those academic circles and mention the Palestinian perspective and that narrative that they might not always hear. And so I feel like every single person, regardless of where you are or your skill sets, your talents, you can resist in your own way. You don't need to be a fighter or to live in Palestine to resist and contribute to us attaining that free Palestine. I wanted to go a little bit back in time and give you a little bit of a background of how I became so passionate about Palestine. I was born in Jordan. I grew up in the United States, and then I came back to Jordan. But my father was a refugee and my grandfather was from Yafa. Up till then, I had no connection whatsoever to Palestine. In fact, I remember once in school, I refused to say I was Palestinian just because I thought it was so uncool. And I mentioned that I was Jordanian. And just looking back at that, like that shame and that lack of sense of identity, it's just so different to who I am now. And I know that many youth can relate to this feeling of not belonging or being kind of westernized and forgetting their identity. But all of that changed when I met my grandfather, and he metaphorically took my hand. He walked me through the streets of Yafa. We sat under the shade of orange trees and swam in the Mediterranean, all of that through his stories. He painted such a vivid picture for me, whether that was through his memories, the names that he remembered, the black and white photos he showed me, that I finally felt like I had a homeland. Up till then, I had felt lost in the world, and he gave me the most valuable gift of a homeland. He was really the one that embedded this love for Palestine within me. He had 11 children and countless grandchildren. His hands were very calloused, whether that was from the shrapnel from the bombings in Yafa in 1948, from having to load his possessions and children's onto a pickup in 1947, in 1967, or from 60 years of working to educate his children and siblings to give them a good life. He was a really great man. He passed away last week at 86 years old. And I was so sad that he never got to go back to Jaffa, which was his ultimate dream. But I do know that I will continue to do everything and dedicate my life so that I can actualize his dream. And it doesn't have to be through me. It can be through my grandchildren or their great-grandchildren, just as long as I know that return is a fact and that I'm paving the way for it. So I wanted to share this not only as a tribute to the wonderful man that my grandfather was, but also to fight against this idea that Israel tries to perpetuate, that the right of return is only for those first-generation Palestinians who were born in Palestine. The right of return is preserved for all Palestinians, no matter their current citizenship, no matter where they are in the world and which generation of Palestinians they are. This is our guaranteed and legal right. And there are so many legal frameworks that say this, whether that's UN resolutions 194, 237, Articles 12, 13, 17 of the International Charter of Human Rights, or Article 49 of the Geneva Convention. This is our birthright, and we should never forget it or allow anyone to tell us that it's not our legitimate right. And so I basically use artwork to visualize the free Palestine that I want to see. And I think artists and writers have such a great role in resistance when we think about Mahmoud Darwish, Ghassan Kanafani, Najil Ali, because artists have this ability to visualize the intangible. And so when you talk to a lot of people our age, they've kind of lost hope after 70 plus years about, returning. But I think as artists, we're able to visualize the impossible and make it into a reality. And I just wanted to end by saying that it's so important for us not to lose hope. I mean, in history, there have been colonizations that have lasted much longer. The French occupation in Algeria lasted much longer, and yet they did gain their freedom. And so there's always hope. And I truly believe that Palestine will be free and that return is a fact, not just a dream, not just a hope. Thank you so much for having this event and making that a stepping stone to our return.
Thanks, Lena. And again, just like everybody else, very appreciative of your story and share, because I know so many people that share that sentiment with you that, they would only say that they're Jordanian and not Palestinian. And so I'm sure people hearing your words really resonated with them. So thanks again. Before I let you go really quickly, tomorrow, if the right of return was granted, what would that mean to you?
I mean, I'm one of those people that will actually pack up everything and just move back to Jaffa. Like, I have no problem because just from how tied I am to that. But it's just that basic human right. It's just justice being served, whether Palestinians want to go back or not. That's just something that should be granted to all of us. And in my mind, it would be such a joyous moment for, even displaced Palestinians within Palestine to go back to their hometowns or home cities, for everyone around the world to come back. And we share so much culture and identity, even outside of Palestine. So I feel like it'll feel like home, because that is our homeland.
100%. I agree with that sentiment 100%. I would, same thing. Next flight. So thanks again for everybody for tuning in. Before we end this amazing event, we're going to move on to the Q&A section.